Women played a significant role during the Civil War period. They were involved in some ways that we do not always associate Civil War women active. On and off the battlegrounds, women were working to boost the economy, fighting on the front lines, making important decisions, and saving lives as nurses. Women being involved definitely helped progress our nation in hidden ways we cannot imagine. A speech delivered by Josiah H. Benton in 1842 stated that,
"Change came slowly, and only as it was forced by necessity, but it came surely, and it came to stay."
However, prior to the Civil War period, women's roles were limited to home and child care. Housekeeping Monthly published an article called How to Be a Good Wife in 1955.
Have dinner ready. Plan ahead even the night before to have a delicious meal ready on time for his return. Letting him know that you have been thinking about him and are concerned about his needs. Prepare yourself. Touch up your makeup, put a ribbon in your hair, and be fresh looking. Be a little more interesting for him. Prepare the children. Minimize all noise. Be happy to see him. Listen to him. Remember his topics of conversations are more important than yours. Never complain. Make sure your home is a place of peace, order, and tranquility, where your husband can renew himself in body and spirit. Make him comfortable. Speak in a low, soothing, and pleasant voice. Don't ask him questions about his actions or question his judgment or integrity. Remember, he is the master of the house, and as such will always exercise his will with fairness and truthfulness. You have no right to question him. A good wife always knows her place.
The cult of true womanhood, commonly known as the cult of domesticity. These ideas of femininity developed during the early 19th century, where submissiveness and work centralized around the home were emphasized. These ideals of Victorian domesticity were challenged once the Civil War occurred. Josiah H. Benton also stated that,
"The war forced a condition of affairs which gave this opportunity to them. Young men left the shops, the offices, and stores by tens of thousands. Clerks in banks and counting rooms, and in all the departments of the national and state governments went into the army.
Fathers, brothers, and husbands all took part in the war, which forced women in both the North and South to play a more active and public role in society. Depending on their social status, certain women were assigned certain roles. During the time of war, women who were not of elite status were left to work to support their family, since the men of their family were off fighting the war. Women also did work to supply the soldiers who were at war. Some women contributed to helping by sewing items one by one so that they would be shipped off to soldiers who were fighting on the front lines. Poor women in the Confederacy mostly worked in factories in order to provide for their families. These factories usually made goods for the army and the soldiers. Approximately 3,000 middle-class white women typically served as nurses throughout the war. On the other hand, lower-class white women, free and enslaved African women worked as cooks, laundresses, and matrons. Black women's role in the war was just as important as white women's roles were. Black women endured war and still managed to help out as much as they could. The first black woman to enlist as a nurse was Susie King Taylor. She tended to the 1st South Carolina Volunteers, which was a colored troop. More black women then joined to help tend to the colored troops. Taylor wrote a book, Reminiscences of My Life in the Camp with the 33rd United States Colored Troops, late 1st SC Volunteers, which looked back on her life in the war. In one excerpt, she declared her patriotism to her country, but also injustices of it as well.
"I was still loyal and true, whether they were black or white. My hands have never left undone anything they could do towards their aid and comfort in the twilight of their lives. In this land of the free, we are burned, tortured, and denied a fair trial, murdered for any imaginary wrong conceived in the brain of the Negro-hating white man. There is no redress for us from a government which promised to protect all under its flag. It seems a mystery to me. They say one flag, one nation, one country, indivisible. Is this true? Can we say this truthfully?
Harriet Tubman was also an important figure in black society. She encouraged black men and women to free themselves and led the Underground Railroad, as well as the expedition to South Carolina. Sojourner Truth, born Isabella Baumfree, was a United States abolitionist and feminist who was freed from slavery in 1826. She became a leading advocate of the abolition of slavery and for the rights of women during the war. Truth became a lecturer and gave speeches on the life of a slave. Her most famous speech is "Ain't I a Woman?"
That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches, and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me, look at my arm. I could have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could heed me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man, when I could get it, and bear the lashes well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen them most all sold off to slavery, and when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman?
This was given in 1851 at a women's rights meeting in Ohio. Today, Truth is still known as the most well-known black female abolitionist speaker. During the Civil War, there were over 450 women that were raped, a majority of these being committed by northern white men against black women, many of them slaves. At the time, there are no laws protecting these women, so many did not receive any sort of justice. In the North, nearly 20,000 women worked to support the Union. They created organizations of ladies' aid societies where soldiers were supplied with food, clothing, and money. Despite this, some women wanted to extend their support by playing a more active role in the war. These women wanted to make their way towards the front lines of the war by becoming field nurses and spies, enlisting as men, and raising money for supplies to aid in the war. Louisa May Alcott, a voluntary nurse in the Union Army in Georgetown, wrote letters home speaking of the soldiers she treated.
More flattering than the most gracefully turned compliment, more grateful than the most admiring glance, was the sight of those rows of faces, all strange to me a little while ago, now lighting up with smiles of welcome. As I came among them, enjoying that moment heartily, with a womanly pride in their regard, a motherly affection for them all.
Barton stated that the Civil War put women of her time at least 50 years in advance than they would be without it. Barton played a role in the ideals of the good death because she wrote letters to families of missing soldiers which allowed for a sense of closure. She was given the nickname Angel of the Battlefield because a surgeon once said, "I thought that night if heaven ever sent out an angel, she must be one because her assistance was so timely." She also founded the Red Cross at age 60 in 1881 and established a nationwide cemetery that identified 13,000 soldiers.
Sarah Rosetta Wakeman enlisted in the war for the Union under the name Lyons Wakeman. In one of her letters home, she wrote,
"Our army made an advance up the river to Pleasant Hill, about 40 miles. There we had a fight. The first day of the fight, our army got whipped, and we had to retreat back about 10 miles. The next day, the fight was renewed, and the firing took place about 8 o'clock in the morning. There was a heavy cannonading all day and a sharp firing of infantry. I was not in the first day's fight, but the next day's. I had to face the enemy's bullets with my regiment. I was under fire about 4 hours and laid on the field of battle all night. There was 3 wounded in my company and 1 killed. I feel thankful to God that He spared my life, and I pray to Him that He will lead me safe through the field of battle, and that I will return safe home." With distorted features among mangled and dead horses, trampled in mud, and thrown in all conceivable sorts of places, you can distinctly hear over the whole field the hum and hissing of decomposition.
In the South, there was a lack of supplies and resources compared to their counterparts in the North. However, women in the South contributed just as much as those in the North in support of the war. They provided supplies for entire regiments with uniforms, blankets, and sandbags. They also cared for wounded soldiers in hospitals and even welcomed them into their own homes to aid them. A factor of their successes included the Confederates' use of female spies.
Rose Greenhow and Belle Boyd unquestionably contributed to the successes of the Confederacy. Greenhow personally worked with Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederacy. Jefferson himself acknowledged the vital role Rose Greenhow played as a spy, and that because of her, the Confederate success at the Battle of Bull Run occurred. She constantly sent letters back and forth while gathering intel to the Confederates' advantage. Additionally, Belle Boyd also benefited the Confederacy. She used her persuasion and charisma to make her way through the Union lines without being caught. She also used gender stereotypes to her advantage, which was undoubtedly clever. These women represent the shift from life centralized around home to becoming one of the most celebrated spies of the Confederacy, which marks a significant turning point for women across the nation and their role in society.
These spies used gender stereotypes to their advantage, which allowed for them to gain information about the North without being suspected. The two most celebrated Confederate spies are Rose Greenhow and Belle Boyd. Belle, at the age of 17, shot a Union soldier for swearing at her mother. She was found not guilty and unpunished, as it was agreed that a woman should have the right to not hear vulgar language. Belle was known for allowing Jackson troops to capture Fort Royal, Virginia. Through her skillful use of charm and persuasiveness, she gained information from the Union lines in Fort Royal through Colonel Phil Brown. Belle manipulated gender expectations, making her blameless in her aid to the Confederacy. Landing in prison for only 2 months, she received special treatment, befriended the warden, and engaged to a fellow prisoner. Greenhow received valuable information about the Union's plan to attack Manassas, Virginia. She immediately sent word to warn the Confederates of their plan, which allowed for them to prepare defeating Union forces at the Battle of Bull Run. The President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, appointed her as an unofficial diplomat. She came to be popular within the French and British social circles. Although we predominantly believe men fought the war, women also participated in the war effort. Most, if not all, women who engaged in battle did so disguised as men. They were not discovered until their bodies were found. Historians approximate 250 documented women fought on both sides during the Civil War. Sarah Emma Edmonds is one woman who fought in the war. She resented her father in her early years because he wanted a son. So she moved from Canada to the United States. She went by the name Franklin Thompson when she moved to the United States to hide her identity and continued to use that name when she served in the war. According to her memoirs, she served as several different people. She served as a spy and disguised herself as a black man, a black woman, and several other men.
My dear comrades, my heart is so full I cannot say what I would to you. Tears are in my eyes, but I shall never, never forget your love and kindness to Frank Thompson. All that I can say is that I'm deeply grateful, and may God bless you.
Women would risk their lives taking up these roles to help their cause. They would go as far as disguising themselves as men to do what they wanted to achieve.
Women in both the North and South, whether white or black, free or enslaved, all played a crucial role in the success of both sides of the Civil War. Women certainly proved to be effective in their roles during this war, since they shifted from a private domestic role to a public active role in society. This impacted American life because views of women drastically changed. People are becoming more aware of the abilities women possess, rather than limiting them to life centralized around the house.